Hello everybody and welcome to the Great Guild Wars 2 countdown. I didn't do one yesterday because stupidly I'd been up all night, so like I had a full day at work and I was just really tired when I got in because I'd been up for like 26 hours by the time I got in, so it was just not feasible. But there are only 20 days or 17 days remaining until the launch of Guild Wars 2. That's pretty nuts. Tomorrow that means we're just going to be fully into the teens. I can't believe it's pretty much just 3 weeks until we're finally there. Lots of stuff finally amping up. I'm hoping to get some more and different and more varied Guild Wars 2-ish content coming out soon, so keep an eye on that. The lore summary, by the way, a lot of people have started asking about it again. It is still coming. I'm pretty sure all of the art is now sorted. I've just got some extra stuff to do on the script, which, to be perfectly honest with you, I could do pretty quickly. So looking like this weekend will be a good shot for that. Anyway, the footage in the background comes from Guanin videos. I thought I'd used these already. I'm so sorry though that I didn't. There are black bars on them, but hey, we can deal with that, I guess. I'm not going to zoom it in like I did before, because sometimes that cuts bits off, which never looks that great. So yeah, thank you very much to them, and they do have plenty of stuff and of other games, so you can find a link in the description down below if you want to check out some more. The feature for today is kind of an just music. Let's just go music. I originally had it written down as Jeremy Soule, which I think only comes to a small part of it. So first of all, Jeremy Soule is the composer, the primary guy for Guild Wars 2. If that name doesn't mean anything to you, if you've ever played the Elder Scrolls series, he's done many other things, by the way, but that's what I think he's most significant for. He does all of the music for that. So all that really amazing music you might have heard in Morrowind, Oblivion, or Skyrim, all that really iconic music, I think you'll find, is all created by him, and you'll actually find in the Guild Wars franchise as well music that sounds very similar to that. In fact, one of the main comments I always hear about pre-searing, or people who first started playing Guild Wars 1, is how much a lot of the music there sounded like Oblivion. And it's funny because Guild Wars 1 and Oblivion came out around about the same time, really, so they do sound very similar. Jeremy Soule continued to do music for all of Guild Wars 1 and in Guild Wars 2 also, and on top of that as well, something quite nice, this is why I just say it's just music in general that's so good, is that ArenaNet seem to have decided to have Guild Wars 1 music playing in Guild Wars 2. There's a bit of a double-edged sword doing that. For me, I found it really powerful and really cool because I got nostalgic about the original game while playing in the second. It felt like it was another thing that grounded these two games within the same universe, and it helped me to feel like I was still playing Guild Wars, even though the games are so significantly different at this point, and that was a really nice effect. One thing I would say though about that being a double-edged sword is the fact that you build memories with certain games with the music that plays, and then you hear that music and it always reminds you of those old good times, right? But if they're putting the Guild Wars 1 music into Guild Wars 2, you're kind of going to overwrite all of those memories. So in 5 years time, say, if we've been playing loads of Guild Wars 2, we're going to hear that music now, and we're not going to think of Guild Wars 1 anymore. That kind of nostalgia factor will be overwritten, and we're going to start looking at Guild Wars 2 stuff. That's just what generally happens with me. I believe that's just kind of the normal thing that will probably happen. I mean, for me, I often listen to other music, out-of-game music, while I'm playing any game out there, and if I've been playing something in particular and listening to just a certain artist, like years later I'll go back, listen to that artist, and I'll think of that game, but then if I use that same artist later on, it kind of overwrites. I think the same thing will happen here, so it's a nice touch. Some people might be a little upset that this is now happening with the music, but I really like it. It certainly keeps the Guild Wars feel going on, and also for such a big game as well, I feel like it's important Guild Wars 2's got a lot of music going for it, and this will certainly help. I just think they've picked such a great guy to do the game. Jeremy Soule is fantastic, and obviously you can buy the soundtrack. You'll get one with Collector's Edition, you'll get one with other stuff. Speaking of Collector's Edition, what a good segue for news for today. I think she's the only one that's done it. It might have appeared elsewhere. I wouldn't be surprised if it had appeared elsewhere. ArenaNet shipped to Felicia Day and presumably other people that did voices for the game an advanced copy of the Guild Wars 2 Collector's Edition, which she then filmed herself opening and put a video out on YouTube about. So you can watch that if you want. It's pretty interesting. I mean, it's an unboxing video. If you're into unboxing videos, then you could go check it out and you might have a bit of fun watching it. It is our first look, I believe, at seeing the actual physical box of Guild Wars 2. It's quite funny. The box actually myself, it's nothing that I thought it would look like. The Ritzlock statue is much bigger than I was expecting, and it's quite cool when then she gets down into the case and stuff, and you get to see everything that's coming with it. So that's quite nice. That was a pretty big video that came out. As I say, I think a lot of other people have probably got it as well, where they've been posting about it online. I don't know, or whatever. I mean, that's just another sign that the release is getting even closer, right? I mean, Jesus, people are already getting the collector's editions. It won't be long before if you guys have bought one as well. I mean, I have. We'll be getting ours posted through the door. I'm actually getting getting really excited about it now. Also in news, ArenaNet announced on Facebook yesterday, I believe it was yesterday. Oh, it could have been the day before that. Yesterday, I just kind of slept in all my free time. ArenaNet announced their trade show plans. This is something usually that's kind of big. I don't know whether it's because I've just been part of this community that's been waiting for a game for so long, but the trade show parts of the year tend to be the biggest parts, the parts where there's most activity, and it's very exciting, right? This year, though, ArenaNet really didn't announce or talk about their plans at all, really, and no one was really asking either, obviously, because the release is coming out around in the middle of trade show season. So it really hadn't crossed my mind, but they did at last say, just a couple of days ago, or yesterday as it was, what their plans are. Gamescom, as you all know, it's actually very, very soon. It's like about a week away, and they've only just announced that they will be at Gamescom, but it's going to be more of a chill-out thing, to quote them, that there's not actually going to be a demo of Guild Wars 2 available at that show, which is usually quite a big one for ArenaNet, I must say. So that's not going to be there. Don't expect too much Guild Wars 2 action, or especially exclusive Guild Wars 2 stuff if you're going there. I think maybe they missed out a little bit there. It might have been cool to have had a demo with like another new area that no one could otherwise get to. That could have been quite fun, could drummed up some extra stuff, but then again, I guess they don't want to be taking resources away from development in this last final push, which I can totally understand. So they're not going with that. However, having said that, they're not deciding not to do demos at all, because just on August 29th, so this is actually a day after the launch of Guild Wars 2, you can go to San Antonio, I believe in Texas. Don't kill me if I'm wrong about that, but you can go there, the GameStop Expo, and they're going to be there with demo stations, but this is after the game's launch. That's going to be on Alienware stuff, so if you're interested in that, I mean, I'd never even heard of the Expo before, but apparently they're going to be there. And funnily enough, no PAX Prime. PAX Prime's the biggest one. I just said Gamescom's quite a big one for ArenaNet. This is the biggest one, and they're not going to be there at all. I mean, it's on their doorstep, but because PAX Prime literally does, I believe, coincide with the launch of Guild Wars 2, or being really, really close to it, they, I think it's like on launch week, they're just not going to be doing, they're not going to be dealing with PAX Prime. Understandable, as I say, I'd like them to have a nice smooth launch instead of having to worry about that. I'm sure most of us will want to be in the comfort of our own home with all of our supplies and stuff ready, so we can just get straight into the servers on launch and play it until we drop. So yeah, that's kind of their plans that they talked about. Also, one other thing, I believe this was also on Facebook, they talked about it. One of the main questions they get quite a lot is, hey, ArenaNet, are you going to do DirectX 11 support? This was something we were asking a long time ago, like since the first trailer kind of thing, I believe. Or maybe it was DirectX 10 we were talking about back then. But they addressed the point recently. They said that there isn't going to be DirectX 11 support in Guild Wars 2 at the launch of the game. They're actually saying that they are, though, assessing how much they feel like people will want it, how viable it would be to put in there, and that they might actually do it post-launch. How sure I am that they'll do it post-launch, I don't know. I mean, they must have a list of some description, right, somewhere, of all this mounting pile of things they're talking about doing post-launch, but how long that's got, I don't know, and whether DirectX 11 really is on there, or whether that's just so that people aren't super upset and they're just saying it, I don't know. It'd be nice to have DirectX 11, but at the end of the day, I feel like the game looks really good as it is. It could run a little bit better, I'm sure. I think a lot of us are hoping that it will run a little bit better. In fact, in Beta Weekend Event 3, there was a patch halfway through, and I have heard a lot of people saying that since that patch, the game ran really well for them, and it like looked far better for them. I didn't see a market increase in performance, but maybe some people on lower spec machines did, and they are getting closer to their original goal of Guild Wars 2 running on mid-end machines, which it doesn't seem to be doing too well at the moment. But yeah, that happened. So, you know, they'll be doing more optimizations and stuff. I guess DirectX 11 will come way after all of that. Finally, for another bit of news, I keep thinking I'm all drained, but I'm not. Lastly, Jeff and Ree did a live Q&A session on Twitch. So there you go, ArenaNet's still using Twitch. They're doing a bit more with it. I missed this. I was in the chat waiting for it like an hour before, got distracted, went off, did something else, and I came back literally as it ended. It was a bit stupid. So I could only watch it after it was already finished. There is a recording of it out there if you're interested. They talk about lore stuff as you'd expect. These are the world builders. These are the guys that created the universe, basically, or have been developing it, at least since they joined ArenaNet. And really, they just talked about general stuff that I think we'd all really heard about before that wasn't necessarily that interesting. It was nice to see the kind of things that they referred to as writers and some of the interesting ideas they had about what was typical of fantasy worlds, where they think they diverge from other fantasy worlds. In fact, one main thing is you hear the fans say quite often that Guild Wars 2 is really unique and different because the humans are the fallen race. A lot of us say that. Usually it's like the elves that are the fallen race at the end of their days, and they've already had their glory days and stuff. And when you actually hear Ree and Jeff talk, they kind of talk about it from a different perspective, and they say that it's quite a common fantasy trope for one race, maybe not just humans, but usually there has already been a golden age, and now you are seeking to reclaim it. And they were talking about this kind of cyclical nature of a lot of fantasy stuff, and they actually said that they were quite typical of fantasy in that regard, and that the humans were actually quite a typical fantasy race because of this, which is quite interesting to me. I always liked that twist on the humans, that I was like, oh look, they're the fallen race on the brink of destruction, and maybe that's not as unique as I'd originally assessed. That's something a lot of people say as well. But the main thing I think that a lot of people were interested in, that I was really happy to see, because I ranted about this recently on one of the dailies. I was like, no one ever talks about Glint's Baby. Let's not forget about Glint's Baby. And somebody asked, hey, what's going on with Glint's Baby, to the developers. I'm surprised. Obviously, these questions are asked by the fans and then put forward to Jeff and Ree, but somebody picks what the questions are. And I'm sure that all of the ridiculously in-depth lore questions that are going to go over 90% of people's heads, and Rhea and Jeff themselves might not even have an answer to, you know, really stupid questions about very specific characters that they might not even remember themselves, stuff like that. I'm sure that they try and avoid that kind of stuff. And honestly, I would have put Glint's Baby in this kind of camp. I would have thought that whoever was moderating the questions would be like, oh no, this looks a bit tricky or whatever, we won't go with it. But they put it forward to them, they rolled with it. Their basic answer was, they said that it had some significance, but they were very around the bush with it. It very much appeared to me that I don't think that, just from the way they worded this, I don't think that there's going to be anything about the baby at Guild Wars 2's launch. I wouldn't be surprised about that. I'm quite happy with the idea of this baby being a significant character, this other dragon being a significant character when the Kralkatorrik expansion actually comes out. I think it'd be a bit stupid to just try and rush it in there right now, where it's not going to be done justice. The devs certainly didn't say that. They said, this isn't a question we've answered, and you can say that as in, this isn't a question we've answered before the game's out, or you can see that as them saying, this isn't a question we've answered in the game. I'm in the latter camp. I definitely do think it's probably not answered at the release of the game, but they did give us a little bit of a teaser on what we can expect to do with Glint in Guild Wars 2 at the launch. They say they tell the story of how she became free from, like, Kralkatorrik's influence, which will be very cool, and they did raise the question, is Glint's baby also free of Kralkatorrik's influence or not? So that will be something that gets answered eventually, I suppose. But that was probably the best question for me anyway, and there you go, that's kind of the answer they gave. There should be a link in the description if I can figure out where that recording was down below. Anyway, right, I guess we'll go for a couple of questions. Talked about news for quite a while today. The first one's from Magalicious Battle Nugget, who said, I've seen a lot of speedruns in jumping puzzles during the beta weekends. Yeah, some people are really good at that, aren't they? Jesus, some of the videos out there of the jumping puzzles put me and Mike to shame. I'll just say that much. Why not implement, they say, an in-game timer for the jumping puzzles and add some sort of server-wide or worldwide scoreboard with rewards at the end of each week or month or so? I think it would increase both the replayability of the jumping puzzles as well as the competitive side of the game. Much love. Yeah, I totally agree with this, and I would love to see stuff like this. Guild Wars 1 even did stuff like this. At the launch of the game, Prophecies, nothing really along those lines happened, but with Factions, they kind of put a lot of steps forward, I guess. They decided they wanted to do a lot of different stuff, and one of the new features that was available in Factions was this concept of competitive missions. So the game had like two camps of missions essentially in PvE in the end. You had cooperative missions, which were the main storyline, and they were the ones that you would kind of just complete and you get a cutscene and you go to the next area, right? Cooperative missions, they were the main meat. But in Factions they added this other type called competitive missions, which would put you in an area with a goal. Usually it was an open-ended goal so that you could continue to score points or whatever while doing it, and it wouldn't necessarily end until you failed. And the whole point of these were to score points. So you would complete mini objectives, you'd kill enemies, you'd defend for a certain amount of time, you'd beat off waves, you'd capture objectives, you'd take items from here or here or here, and you'd get points for this. And the whole idea of competitive missions were that then those points would go onto a scoreboard and be compared against every other team that went in, and you could be competitive about it. So you weren't directly against other people. It wasn't player versus player, but your scores and times were compared, and then you could get like the #1 spot for the current day, for the past 30 days, or for the past quarter of a year. It was all recorded on there, and there were rewards for each of these tiers depending on how well you did. The rewards were never that good in Guild Wars 1 though, and a lot of people didn't really play into this scene. Some people did, and some guilds got very good at specific ones of these competitive missions and ended up just dominating the scoreboards constantly, and there was no real way for anyone else to poke their head in, and very little incentive for people to do that as well, given to the fact that there wasn't much in the way of rewards. What I think would have been perfect, honestly, for Guild Wars 1, it never happened, and it's too late now, it wouldn't matter, but what would have been perfect for Guild Wars 1 would have been a title that you can only display if you are #1 for that 30-day spot, for the month spot, or for the quarterly spot, for any of those competitive missions, and a couple more were added for Nightfall as well. That would have given people tons of incentive. Having a title that only one or anyone out, that 7 other people, let's say, that did the same mission as you in the entire game have at that one moment, that would be brilliant. People love exclusivity, and that would be great. So if you could have a title that said, hey, in the past 3 months, this quarter of the year, no one has beaten me on this mission. Here's my title. It's some kick-ass name. Look at me, I'm awesome. People would have loved that. They really, really would have, especially with a game like Guild Wars 2. And a whole community and scene would have developed around those competitive missions, and it would have been brilliant. But that never happened. They never really took up. When Nightfall came out after Factions, ArenaNet put significantly less focus on the competitive missions. They did add a little bit more incentive for people to do them in the short term, in that they gave us drops that would give our heroes nicer armor. But once you had those, that incentive was gone. So once again, no real community developed around them. There were individuals, there were very, very small people, but it was never a big thriving aspect of the game that it could have been. And with Eye of the North, there was a similar thing, but it was pretty much gone from there, and I guess ArenaNet just decided they weren't really going to roll with it. Now we come forward to Guild Wars 2, and they have this philosophy that they're just saying constantly, we only want people in PvE to be playing alongside one another. That's what our game's about. And I totally agree with that, right? They've done some great stuff for that. They've made sure we're not going to be kill stealing, we're not going to be camping over nodes or over certain enemies. None of that competitive stuff's going on. When you're playing Guild Wars 2, you do not anymore feel negativity towards another player that's in the area. That's gone, that's brilliant, and we get to be sociable in the MMO. But, you know, that doesn't mean ArenaNet, in my opinion, have to skimp and scrape on every little thing. Dueling's another one. I think that Dueling, whatever, is another one that would be great for Guild Wars 2, but they have the same philosophy, and they're saying that they don't really want it. But no, obviously more recently they've said that it could be there after the launch of the game. It's still on that list. It's one of those things that could be added that they are looking towards. So there's that at least, but this is another thing that this is kind of their answer again. This whole competitive stuff, it's not going to be there because they want people to be playing with each other. That's like their theme. I don't agree. I think that would be a brilliant thing for Guild Wars 2. I think if the dungeons end up kind of weak, as people are worried that they'll be weak, people are worried that the team aspect of these dungeons could be somewhat subpar. They are worried about these things. And if Guild Wars 2's end game, as far as dungeons at the very least are concerned, doesn't live up, that is one thing that could really redeem it and add a lot of excitement back and a lot of replayability back. This idea, as I say, and I would take forward the title idea again, that you could compete with one another 4 times. And what you say here, your particular suggestion about adding them for jumping puzzles, sure, if they were going to go ahead and do it with dungeons, why not do it in these other places like jumping puzzles too? I think it would add a lot to the game. You're right. You say, oh, it would add replayability. Hell yes, it would. A lot of replayability, and it would add a lot more diversity in the things you wanted to aim for and achieve while you're in the game. I would love it. I really, really would. But this has kind of been ArenaNet's answer. I don't believe I've heard the subject be broached to them for a while now, but that was their answer last I heard. The game was supposed to be more about being cooperative in PvE than competitive. Is that a sufficient answer? What do you guys think? I mean, I'm not sure myself. Actually, I feel like I should add too that when Guild Wars 1 was like totally finished, really, and the Guild Wars Beyond content had just started to come out, and we weren't necessarily sure how much of it was going to be, and really there wasn't much to keep a strong PvE community occupied. The main thing that a lot of people who were really into the end game stuff ended up doing was racing each other through these end game encounters, trying their very best to get the very best times. Now this was probably born out of the fact that for the greatest rewards, the largest amount of money and so forth, a lot of these people were trying to get really fast times as it was. They were trying to speed run the dungeons to make sure that they had the best time so that they got the most money. But what came out of this eventually was different guilds posting their times on how fast they got through these encounters, and something of a community within what remained of the PvE Guild Wars 1 endgame was born. So this idea of a competitive endgame where people are racing against one another like this is clearly, if you ask me, a good idea, because you can see even the players themselves ended up doing it off their own backs. Now, you can kind of sit there, I guess, and say, oh, if they're doing it off their own backs, then what's the point in ArenaNet having to go off and implement it for themselves? The people that really want to do it are just going to do it anyway. And I guess that is a valid point, but there's also a significant difference in, I think, the player base of people that would really love and enjoy doing something like this, but only if it's encouraged by ArenaNet or gives them some tangible reward or some feeling of worth outside of simply bragging about it on the forums elsewhere or through some third-party means. I feel like that's a very significant divide, and obviously it is something that people enjoy to the point where they've gone and done it off of their own backs. That just means they would have a much larger audience if ArenaNet were to support it. So it shocks me that they're not doing something like this for the Guild Wars 2 endgame dungeons. I mean, why not? We could have the same thing. Oh my god, this guild managed to get this fast in the Ascalon catacombs. How is this even possible? What did they do? And they're trying to find out each other's techniques and stuff. It really was a fascinating experience. You look at some of those times in Guild Wars 1, and if you understand anything about the encounters that are being completed and how fast they're being done, it really is mind-boggling and very, very, very impressive. I guess the one thing ArenaNet might be a little concerned about is people are very good at finding exploits when they want to, and some of these times you actually see in Guild Wars 1 were through the use of exploits. So this would have to be something the live team, if it ever wasn't implemented, would have to keep their eyes on and make sure that there's nothing too unfair or too cheaty going on. But I feel like it would add so much to the Guild Wars 2 endgame that by no means do I think is lackluster in any way. I feel like it's going to have a brilliant endgame just through the way they set up the scaling and so forth. But still, it would go amiss. I feel like it's something that the game could benefit from greatly, but it's not there. Anyway, I've rambled a bit. We've been talking for a while and I've only really done one question. I think I've just been a bit deprived of daily, to tell you guys the truth. I need to sit down and have a good old talk to you every day, otherwise it all builds up a little bit. Anyway, that's Guild Wars 2 Daily for today. Thank you very much for watching. I still have a load of questions, really good, interesting questions that I've picked from you guys that I want to go through. I've still got that special episode I want to do of community stuff. The list just keeps growing. And also, I'm thinking of doing an extra video, hopefully tomorrow, that will be about one of these theories that I've talked about quite often, that I actually feel like there's enough there now that I could dedicate a video to, and that's the idea that the Sylvari, the pale tree itself, is an elder dragon. And I love some of the ideas and ways people have been combining this with other theories, which hopefully I'll talk about tomorrow. So yeah, lots to talk about, lots to do. The game's coming closer. Thanks again, and I will see you tomorrow for 19 days. See you next time, everyone.